Hi, everyone. We are in a season of talking about healing from toxic relationships. Today, we're going to get into toxic marriages, a really challenging subject, one that has a lot of different aspects to it that need to be addressed. We're going to do our best to have conversation that's fruitful, but also honest, because this is a really difficult subject. And we have seen a lot over the years of many things that are going on behind the scenes in marriages that need to be addressed. And in the scriptures, Jesus talks about his relationship with us as believers as the bride of Christ. He uses marriage. This whole thing and this whole story of the scriptures is wrapped around the context of marriage. Paul the apostle himself talked about how a man and a husband and a wife should interact with each other, right? But then he ties it right into our relationship with Christ. And Jesus comes in the book of Revelation and gives some very strong exhortations to his bride. So marriage is meant to be something that is to be beautiful. It is meant to be something that reflects the work of what Christ did and is currently doing. It's also under major attack, because it's the highest level of relationship. It's the highest level of connection. It's covenant level. And there's a great war over this. And so what I'd like to do today is talk about this. We've done many episodes before. We have material, Marriage for Overcomers. We've done countless work, hours and days of work, working on marriages.
Working on our own marriage.
And that's really where this all starts, is our work does not begin in trying to help others. We don't have all the answers, but we have worked hard on our lives. And we're raising the call for overcomers who really want to work on their marriage. We've had a lot of heartache. We've been misunderstood. We've been misquoted. We've been taken the wrong way. And quite frankly, we just have to accept that, because we are drawing a line in the sand of raising what's possible, because there is a plague that is in our culture, in the church culture. It's called the roommate syndrome, where a marriage slowly or rapidly moves from a covenant place to a roommate place. Now, I say this because there's one type of roommate syndrome we probably won't get into today. There's two roommate syndromes we address. One roommate syndrome is, there've been a lot of great things. You have a great sense of love and respect for each other, but it's kind of at times moved into some ruts. At times you feel like there's two ships passing, and there needs to be some first love kind of things that need to be addressed. You need to get back to what it means to really put the relationship first. Jesus said, repent and go back to the first works. You've lost your first love. There's that kind of aspect. What we want to get into today in our discussion is another form of a roommate syndrome, but this is damaging now. This is emotionally, spiritually, even at times physically. I mean, really, they're all encompassing. They're not; these are not like separate: spiritual, emotional, physical. They all are connected. It is damage to one, if not both people, and it needs to be addressed. Now, my biggest concern over toxic marriages is that a lot of things are being hidden under the carpet for the sake of nice spiritual answers. And we found we're challenging that. We're challenging that thing that people raise to the surface that go, well, I don't want to leave this marriage, or I don't want to get a divorce, as though that is
the highest, place of spirituality.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. As though we hold that.
It's a badge of honor. Right.
And we really cut through that, because many times that can be an excuse for staying in something that is abusive. It is also can be a cloud to cover not dealing with the issues. Right. So because we didn't get a divorce, but we never dealt with anything, I personally believe Jesus shakes up that mentality when he told the Laodicean church, you're either hot or you're cold, you're lukewarm, and it makes me want to spit you out of my mouth. So people by implication could hear Jesus saying, he wants us to be cold. No, he's saying make a decision. And so what we want to say up front, before we even get into the discussion, is we call people to decision. What are you going to do with where you're at? Either get in or get out. And people will say, oh, Mark DeJesus is encouraging divorce.
Right.
No.
It's not true. Right.
And if I get misinterpreted that way, I have decided I'm going to accept that, because it's the price that comes with telling people you are not victims. You have the ability to choose this day and decide where this is going. And the key for any marriage to heal is two people coming together, working on each of their issues, and then together bringing that and working on their issues together. It's hard work, but it is something that can be done, that God can take two really broken people and move them into healthy directions. So I want to lay that out up front, is that we're going to challenge your ability to decide. And that may take some people right now where they click and they are out of this episode.
And that's fine.
And that's fine. But what we also don't want to ignore, we will not ignore the toxicity of sin that wants to work within our marriage. And we have a thief that's wanting to steal, kill everywhere. I would say first, let's kind of look at this from a vantage point of, okay, what is a toxic marriage? Like, what are some signs that there's toxicity? So what comes to mind first for you, just off the top of your heart, when you hear the word, or the two words, toxic marriage? What comes to mind?
Well, there's a lot of things. One of the things that jumps out at first is there's not real good exchange of communication between two people. That alone right there can take you on a spiral of just some bad stuff. When you are not being honest and communicating with each other, that is a recipe to go really toxic, because when you're suppressing how you feel, there's no safety in being able to talk about how you feel. That's a big part of that there's no safety in it, meaning that if you say something, other person's going to walk away, shut you down, make you feel stupid, not engage you, stare at you, say nothing. There's a whole bunch of stuff that falls under that umbrella of not feeling safe in communication.
Yeah, and we bring to the marriage in communication, we bring our brokenness and we bring our broken communication pathways.
Yeah.
And when somebody talks to you in a way that triggers something, you respond according to a broken pattern in your history, then it causes them to, and then you have this cycle. And the enemy's desire is to take each of your brokenness, hook it on each other, and create a cycle where, and we saw this right at the jump early on. Now, in us getting married, it's not that we were smarter than anyone else. I think the one thing that was helpful was we understood that there's a war going on that doesn't want you and I to have a fruitful relationship.
Right.
Wants to bring out all the garbage, make the other person the enemy, and then we never grow, and the potential that's there gets lost.
Correct. Absolutely.
So I think that when I think of a toxic marriage, I think of one or both. What I find is it's in my work, it's usually one, because I usually have one person coming for help and one person wants it more than the other.
Yeah.
The other person is there reluctantly. The other person is there because, like, well, she's threatening to leave, so I better get some counseling. You know, that's not really a good motive, because then you're not going to do any work. That's where the toxicity really starts to show itself. You have one person that really wants to be healthy, and the other person is just not interested in dealing with stuff.
Right.
And so they then it can create a lot of stubbornness where that person's not.
Right. I was going to say a lot of pride manifests in that kind of scenario. And that's very, very dangerous when you do not even have a capability to have any kind of empathy for the other person's pain over the marriage, or B, like just any humility to say, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. That wasn't my intention, but let's talk. when those two things are not there, that's really hard.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any hope for healing and growth in a marriage until both people can learn what it means to humble themselves to get to a place of reasoning, both
Right.
people. I've been reading a lot in James lately and just studying what he talks about when he talks about wisdom from above, and he talks about wisdom from below. It's interesting. The devil has a wisdom that he presents, and the Bible even says it's sensual, demonic. It's deceptive, right? It appears as wisdom. We live in a world where there's a lot of like things that look like they're good, and they're not. It's not wisdom from God. But anyways, reading through that and then seeing the strife, where strife kicks in, that the goal of the enemy is to create this quarreling contention. It doesn't have to be you screaming at each other and throwing plates. Most hatred and destructive bitterness is very quiet. And
Right.
I want us to pause for a second and think about that statement. A vast majority of abuse is not very loud. It's quiet, stubborn, resistant. You can feel the anger. You can feel the resentment. You're not screaming, because you have to understand the enemy doesn't always want to show his hands and his cards as he's working and driving certain factors. And James says a profound statement. Where there is this strife, this bitter envying, there is every evil thing. So count on it. You're going to be swatting flies for the rest of your life until he gives hope. He says, but God gives more grace to the humble.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. As you were talking, I kind of did like a little like historical Rolodex in my mind of my thought about marriage, coming into marriage, and then that thought of that, usually what's going on in a marriage there is fighting and screaming, don't get me wrong, but most of it is like a quiet passivity that,
Right.
a lot of the marriages I saw before you and I got together, a lot of the husbands were having affairs. They're going out, still partying with their friends from high school in their 30s and 40s, and maybe not even having full-on affairs, but I mean, flirting with danger and being very inappropriate, and going home to their wives, and they're the soccer coaches at school, and look like they have these amazing marriages. And
Right.
I watched this from the sidelines for so long. And I was always one of those people that I rock the boat, because I was like, that wife needs to know, and I was the
Sure.
one that would be, keep your voice quiet, and we don't want to rock the boat. But I would watch all these things and go, I don't want that. I was terrified of having one of those. To me, that's what marriage was. You really didn't talk. The wife either stayed at home, she had her cute little job, the husband went out, then he would go out and do his thing with his friends on the weekends with,
Right.
well-to-do families. And that was growing up for me. Okay, that's what you should have. No one really talks about all of that stuff. And so as I was watching all these things, I was when I say terrified I was going to end up like that.
Me too.
That to me was like a prison.
Me too.
Not being able to say anything, not being able to talk to my husband, and everyone around me knowing that my husband is out doing something and no one's telling me. I think a lot of people live like this, by the way. And to look at that was so terrifying. And so I had a couple instances where I could have gotten married and I didn't, because I looked at the person and said, that will be my future. No, we're not connected the way we should be. No. So now I meet you, and we were both on our individual journeys of healing ourselves and moving towards what we wanted in life. And when we came together, the one thing, right, I knew what I didn't want. But if you were to ask me, well, what does it look like to have a healthy marriage? I don't know that I could have articulated that. But I could have told you what all this yuck is. So it was so helpful for you and I in the beginning when we were hashing all of this out of what do we want?
Mm-hmm.
What do we want so that we are not toxic?
Right.
And a lot of people are not doing that.
Yeah. That's you've really highlighted the problem, is that want to of like really wanting to go there. And the longer you don't, the more fearful it is to ever go there.
Right.
So you start building up all these walls and these protective mechanisms.
Right, because how many people have we met with when, we'll either meet with one of the spouses and then we say, okay, bring the other spouse in. And behind the scenes, we already know, because we've talked to one of the spouses, they don't talk. And they're terrified to talk.
Right.
Then when they come in, the other spouse is like, yeah, no, I don't, what's the problem? You're like,
right.
Your spouse is terrified to talk to you. You're
Right.
both good people.
Right.
But they don't know how to talk.
And there's a lot of avoidance
Yes.
around issues. And I understand this because it happened to Adam and Eve, right? They immediately hide. He's blaming her. He's blaming God. So we've been doing that ever since. But we just need to recognize this. If there's issues in your marriage where you have don't go there subjects,
Yeah.
to me, that's a danger sign. That's a danger sign this is going to be a quiet, toxic. And then what happens is there are mental and emotional health issues that arise. Heavy depression or anxiety. And there becomes this like, oh, I got to work on this. And it's like, wait, you live in a toxic world that's slowly killing you. And then you're trying to expect yourself to just get better. That you're with someone 24. You live with someone. Maybe you're not with them 24/7, but you're married to someone where there's issues that you don't feel safe to get closer, because our battles should draw us closer together.
Right.
Our victories should draw us closer together. We're meant to learn, because it's that bond, it's that vulnerability. I'm struggling, but I'm growing, and here's what's happening. So there's a lot of things hidden, and it's not just the things like pornography or sexual sins and those things, which there's a high percentage of that right now. That's just the tip of the iceberg of the bondage that's hidden and underground. There's a lot of deep resentment. There's a lot of hatred issues. There's a lot of unresolved pain that was never worked through, and it's just stuck.
Yeah,
So
and I think so many people.
let me just.
Oh, go ahead. Finish your thought, and then I'll.
Yeah, so you're stuck at the plateau of what you've been able to address.
Right.
Right? Does that make sense? So it's like you're meant to grow. Here's an issue. Go, and then you keep trying to grow, and it's just not happening. Does that make sense?
There's a mystique about it, right? Because you're not really told, what does the growth look like? Your wedding day's amazing, and you're saying the vows, and you're like, yes, I'm so in love with this person. I'm dedicated to them. And, or, which a lot of people go, well, we were together long enough and it was time to get married. There's all different stories out there. But for the most part, on your wedding day, when you're hearing the words that are spoken over you, you're like, we are one. We're going to do this. And somehow you think, I guess it's just going to magically get there, where you just happenstance upon growth, right? No one really models for you or tells you what that growth looks like. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh yeah, no, I must not be in love with that person because this isn't what I signed up for.
So what's the average?
Right?
What's the average cost of a wedding these days?
Oh gosh.
I mean, I wouldn't know. It's been a while.
Pre-COVID, maybe I would say.
Pre-COVID. No. Yes.
Well, we stayed very minimum at our wedding, and it was 14 years ago now. But I would say it's probably 30 or 40 grand. I would think. Yeah. At a minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say some people would say
which is
even
a waste of money. Use it for a down payment.
So, what about if you spent let's say $40,000?
Yeah.
What if you spent a quarter of that working on marital issues, either conferences, coaching work, counseling? Mm-hmm. That would, in my opinion, give you what you need, but that's not where we invest. No. So this is what it plays into. It plays into the culture at the end of the day. Let's all just be honest. Can we just be honest? Because I don't like playing games. We invest in marriages that look good. Mm-hmm. Not so much in marriages that need to really grow. So if we look at how we structure our lives, your interactions with people, your positions in church, your business things, everything hedges around protecting the look of your marriage, the look of the family, as though that's what God's really looking at. We're very deceived, as though God's like giving us an applause, and like, oh, the things look good. And meanwhile, there's just like that, and that was an immersion awakening experience for me. I can't remember the day, I can't remember the time, but I do remember going, oh my, the veil came off of how much dark battles were going on in marriages of even influential people. Then when it came out publicly, it was like, oh, how did this happen? It was like, it was happening all along.
Right.
So this is the thing. I've seen it now and I can't go back.
I know.
So, and that's the work that I do. And my job is to have empathy and compassion for their battles, that God's love meets you where you're at. But there is a decision we have to make. Where are we going to go? What are we going to do? And you and I have had many conversations over very difficult, just broken issues of our life that we had to bring to the table and go, what are we going to do? First of all, we had to say, we're going to face it. Second of all, what's our motive? And we both walk away going, we want to work on this. We want to work on this. The tragedy is when you have one side that's not in. And before you go, well, that's me, I'm putting all in and the other person isn't. Be careful of that mindset, because then you make it like you're the angel and the other person's the devil. Beware of that, because then you start to develop blind spots. You become self-righteous in your, oh, I give and he does nothing, or I do all these things and she does nothing. Beware of that mindset. But when one person isn't willing to, there's a stubbornness, there's a pride. There's times where I don't do this as much anymore. I've decided it's too exhausting. But I challenge those things, and I would poke at it. I'd poke at the pride. I'd poke and
at my pride, you're saying?
No, or
your
sorry.
own pride.
And people I'm working with.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
And people I'm working with, and situations I'm working with. I would, because that's a game changer for me, is humbling myself. Nothing beats that. Humbling myself before God and having conversations with you out of that.
Right.
Now we're heart to heart. There's the daggers are put away. Just, hey, I want a good marriage. And I'm willing to just see me and work on me. And how can we have agreement? And people then over the years, it's many years now, where marriage after marriage comes in, and most marriage issues need something. It's a nerve that needs to get hit. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times in counseling, in average settings, you kind of can't just tell somebody, right? You kind of have to, the goal is that they come up.
To make them kind of see it for themselves.
Right.
Right.
And there's times, call it faith or call it just being a little crazy, that I just want to take a step of faith and poke at this. What have we got to lose here? And 9 times out of 10, the behemoth of passivity and anger and self-hate, and the Bible calls it a spirit of slumber, right? In Romans, Paul talked about it, like the spirit of stupor that comes over you. And it just numbs out your existence. You're passive. You're not taking your place in the home and really being awake and alive. When you poke at it, that monster comes up and pushes back in anger, right? And then with the goal of, leave me alone, don't go here anymore. And I poke it and I let it manifest, because there is a 10% chance that if you hit that nerve, the person will humble themselves.
I wouldn't even say 10.
You were being nice. Well,
you're being nice. No, you were being nice. And here's the thing: the one thing you need to know in tuning into what we do.
5%.
I don't even know.
3.
Maybe 3.
I do have a handful of.
You do have, yeah, but we are truthful. We're not going to sugarcoat it. We're not. And I think those of you that are the pursuers of truth and justice in the heart and overcoming, your history and wanting to be the healthiest you can and have that in all your relationships, you're not dummies either. You're looking around going, okay, there's not many people that want to do this. And if they say they are, the odds that you're going to find, there's small percent. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's small percentages. So now you have marriages that are struggling, and I don't care what anyone says about what's all the stuff going on in the world. Like, it's family that needs to be fixed first. It's family that needs the adjustment. It's family that needs to be healed.
Amen.
So this is the war. This is the war right here. It's none of the other stuff going on in the world. It's this right here. And sometimes I've thought, like, sometimes I want to look at people and beg them. We had those times in the beginning of because here's the thing. We know what it feels like. It is not easy. It's not easy when someone is telling you that you hurt me and you did this and you did that, to not want to say, some maybe foul things back to them and get out of my face.
Or say you hurt me too, and just
right. Yeah. That's the easier road. The tougher road is going, okay, I want this to work, and having a more open lens to what my history is with men, what happened between me and my dad, the things that my mother did or did not give me as a woman. Like, there is a swirl. It's a hornet's nest of stuff that you're carrying into marriage, and to not be aware of those things, you got to be aware of them,
because it all comes out in marriage.
It all does.
All the way back to childhood, whether you were nurtured or not, your infancy, your toddler years, your teenage years, how you related to people, how your relationship with your dad, your mom, all of it comes out in marriage. That's why we're in the 50 to 60% of divorce, because it's too much to handle. And if you don't have two people that go, I want to do this and I want to work on things, it's going to be a rough road. I have said this on a previous podcast before, and you want to see how you can be like intimate, conversation wise, just relational with your spouse. Sit across from them in silence and look at each other and pray for the other person with your eyes open and see how comfortable that is. That's a good gauge, don't you think? That's a really good gauge. It's a really good gauge to see how comfortable you are with the other person. I cannot tell you the countless number of people that tell me, well, I know my husband prays for me. I know they pray at night. What? Yeah. No. Do they take authority? Do they pray with you with authority? Both spouses. Okay. What have you moved to a place where that is comfortable between? I'm not talking about super spiritual. Jesus. No, I'm talking intimate prayer of heartfelt connected prayer together. Right. That is very difficult. That's a difficult thing for people. Because one of the first... Sorry, I didn't mean to take a tangent into prayer. Don't be sorry. That's where we need to be. When we were first engaged, we exposed ourselves to teaching material and got our hearts aligned to helpful tools. And one of the things we realized was there's areas we need true deliverance from, because we were carrying our familial patterns. Whatever your spiritual warfare theology is, I don't care. There's a devil. There's stuff. There's a war going on. You feel it. This stuff is not you, but there's a real battle going on. And we realized that, and we wanted to work on ourselves. And where it started was we would sit down and just do simple bitterness and forgiveness ministry. And that's where we would, when you talk about looking in the eye, first of all, that was the first war we had to wage. Well, first of all, we couldn't even sit down to do it. You could. You could. I fought it. I could. You were good. Well, I was rotten. I'm gonna just say it, and you don't agree. No, I'm kidding. Well, I was fighting too. I was fighting. So uncomfortable. Oh, I was fighting too, because it wasn't like I was just like, oh, I just want to do this. There was this resistance that rose up. Like, can we just do something else? And then you'd be like, I don't feel like I'm not in the mood. I don't really want to do this right now. And it would just ratchet up the anger. Like the very thing we were going to pray for was now ratcheting up to like sabotage this moment. So then I just went, doggone it, we're just going to do this. Yeah, you're so good at that. Well, here's the prayer I prayed. I want a good marriage more than I want a good job, more than I want a good ministry, more than I want good friendships. I want a great marriage. That's it. that, and because everything flows out of that. My parenting flows out of that. So I said to God, I want to love this woman if it kills me. Mm-hmm. And he took me up on that. He did kill a lot of stuff in me, but I had to have that decision that I'm going to fight for this. We don't know how to fight for things. We think, well, Jesus paid it all, so we're just going to have an easy life. Or we think, oh, God, just do something about my marriage. Now, it's okay to go, God, I humble myself. That's the start. But you got to learn how to, when you've done all to stand, how to fight through things in a good way. And so in that moment, you would pray through just renouncing bitterness out of your life. Or I would pray through renouncing bitterness out of my life. Because most marriages have a bitter root to the opposite sex. Mm-hmm. That's there. It's in the majority of marriages. It's all right. See, we all got stuff. And when we began to renounce that, and then the other person would pray a prayer of freedom, you know, of really just agreeing with that. And we would look at each other in the eyes. And it wasn't just like this magical thing, but there would come a moment in time where you could feel a bond happening between us.
Oh, absolutely.
Where I could see you with my heart without that clutter. And I could see you in a way I was meant to. And I could, even if it was just for a moment, get a flash look at what's possible. And we'd sit back after praying and go, this is real.
Absolutely.
This is real.
But there is a war over it. And somebody has to, it's not going to perfectly come together where both people are like, this feels awful and yucky, but you know what? Let's do it. If you do, that's awesome. But usually one person, and I encourage it to be the man because you did do this, you set and put a charge of, we need to do this. There was a standard that we had talked about prior to marriage and then coming into marriage that's now being challenged of what are we going to do that you would constantly put on the table and put a charge out to us.
Yeah.
And for that, I am eternally grateful. And every time we have a big thing in the house, we like to do gratitude journals. That's always pretty much for me at the top of my list is who Mark is and the heart he has towards just health, and no matter what, we're going to fight for it. So there was an element of that you always brought to the table that would draw me in, that even though I was fighting every ungodly demon inside of me because of my history, there was an element that did give me, I didn't know it at the time, but a safety to go, all right, I'm just going to do this, even if it's awkward.
The thing that I feel was helpful is that in our, if we had a fight or if we had something we're working through, the standard that I tried to look at in our conversation was not what I want or what I thought. There was an outside standard of like, this is what God's word says. And how can we begin to using that as a mirror for us versus just what I think, what you think, or what. So I think that one, that was a place of agreement and outside standard. Two, there is also the help of outside input. If you're in this situation, you go, my marriage is toxic. What you need is you need to sit under the input of someone who knows what they're talking about, isn't just going to wash over, and give you honest input of what's going on. If that round can't be passed, there's not much that can be done.
Yeah.
Not much to be done. Don't think, well, if we just go to,
this person will be the magic key that unlocks my husband's voice. This will be the key. No.
Yeah, there is no there is no
magic.
There's no superhero marital counselor that's going to just if anyone's just decent at what they're doing, they're just going to help bring awareness to what's there.
Right. They're going to build on the desire that the two of you have.
Yep. And so I don't know how to bring about anything unless there's true humility, because then you're teachable. Because when you go into marriage, you think you know what you want, you think you know what you need, you think most marriages think they know what's happening. And there's like this whole avenue that's a blind spot that you need. often input from, and you need to lower your pride and listen. So a lot of times when I see that, I go, "You're not ready." I have couples that will write to me. We need marital help, but my husband's
It's usually the wife.
resistant.
Right.
But he said that he'll try it. Like, he's not ready.
Yeah.
He's not ready. I don't know that people are used to that response. But it's like he's just not ready. When he's ready, have him contact me that he wants a marriage. And because of the patterns, and I'm not saying that the wives are just angels 24/7.
Correct.
But I find that the attack is over the man. It's over the man's heart. The enemy has had a dart that he shot at the man's heart because, like I've taught for years, when you take out the man, you get a clearance sale for the enemy. Because when you hit the man's heart, knock him out of his place of influence, it now deadly affects the woman's heart. It trickles down to the children, and then it gets repeated in the next generation.
Correct.
So it's just one bullet has that effect. So with that strategy understood, many times when I do marital work, I go, let me just meet with the man. It's not about it being all his fault. It's not. But what I want to do is I want to work on the issues of his heart where he wasn't fathered, where he wasn't mentored, where he wasn't equipped. And what does it mean? There's so much confusion in the world today about what it means to be a masculine man with
it's hated.
With a heart after God. There is a demonic hatred that's in existence that hates what the Father's heart can bring. And that's why a big part of our message is the Father's heart, restoring yourself to understanding how to relate to Father God, working through the lack of fathering in your life, because then I can help set a stage to then, as we bring the two of them together, of each of them working on their own issues and coming to the table and realizing you're never my enemy. There is an enemy. You're not my enemy. Well, we're going to work together. But where I find there's kind of three categories that I find to be, I hate to say impossible, but they're just unless there is I'm cautious in even how I say this because people weigh some of these words so heavily. Right. I was going to say, unless there's some miracle, which then leads people to go, oh, I'm waiting for the miracle.
I know.
So let me just say, these are areas that can be impossible. Number one is when your spouse is an addict.
Correct.
You're running uphill on an icy mountain against the Earth's rotation with wind blowing at you at 150 miles per hour. So just so you know. And unless there is high level work,
intense work,
accountability, consistent work being done, it's going to become codependent. You're going to have to call good evil. It's going to open up for mental illness. The addict world is one that wants to stay hidden too. The second one is the narcissistic kind of thing. Right. I began to see this a lot over the years, and I've gotten to the point where I can see it. And usually when I see it, I tend to go. I tend to back off in even trying to reason, because narcissism is a very twisted, very, very twisted world of self-centered survival and twisting of relationship and twisting of things that are said and very abusive in many ways. Right.
And they don't have any real empathy for people. So it's hard to get them to humble.
Correct. And then the third is what you just said with the humility, is when there is unbudging pride and stubbornness.
Like you brought out.
Like a scoffer. Yeah. So those kind of areas.
2 episodes ago, I believe.
Those areas all create a form of abuse.
Correct.
All 3 of those areas. And when we think of abuse, most people often think of a husband, beating his wife, physically. And even then, people tell him, oh, stay in this because God hates divorce. I know. They're getting beaten.
So awful.
We went through, and people have verified this. We went through, and even people that grew up in the 50s and 60s, I didn't, but they, relay that. And even later on, there was a lot of pastoral counsel of just stay in it and hope God will. Yeah. And it was calling evil good. It was saying this is okay. And Frank is is an elder, so, just hang in there with him. Meanwhile, Frank is not humbling himself. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about abuse, there's a lot of things that are done that are abusive to the marriage that you need to recognize. When your wife's in pain and you do nothing and walk out of the room, that's a form of hatred. It's an act of abuse. It just doesn't look like it because nothing was done. That's why they call it passive aggressive,
right?
Because it's a passive way of aggressively allowing the enemy to leave a punch, right? I'm not saying this to beat people up. I'm saying it to raise
we need sobriety on what's happening.
Raise the standard,
right?
So that we go, oh, when my wife is talking to me and I walk out of the room, I'm stabbing her in the heart.
Right. And then unfortunately what happens is either an hour later, days later, they act like nothing happened.
That's abusive. It's
Nothing's
abusive
wrong.
to the it's
that
abusive
is
to the mind.
Trauma.
Yeah.
It's trauma.
Right. And so I share all this to say it's for, like you said, sobriety. So many people will hear this and go down in discouragement. That shows you're not tuned to the Spirit of God. Mm-hmm. When you're tuned to the Spirit of God, you hear the exhortation of the word of the Lord. It raises you up. It empowers you that there is a big God who loves me, mm-hmm. and I have worth and value, and I'm worth being loved. And I will humble myself, but I will bring a loved daughter, a loved son of God to this discussion so that there is, there's a thing about marriage where there's a potential, but I need to treasure it. I need to treasure what's there, and I've got to want to fight for it and guard it and to see that experience breakthrough. And so if you go under it in discouragement, you're listening to the wrong voice.
Right.
And it's bringing out broken patterns. And many will say, well, I've done this and I've done that. And at times they'll say, well, I've been, and what happens is that I've been teaching on this, the self-pity victim story comes out, right? So here's a way that you break the programming. Because when somebody's constantly telling a victim story, yes, you need to be compassionate. But there are times where you got to break the programming because it has a pattern that keeps going, cycling. I've done this, and so there many years, and you keep repeating the story. So I cut off the story and go, so why don't you get a divorce? And it's like, almost like.
It's very interesting how people react when you say that.
It suffocates because they never expected me to say that. I'm not advocating for divorce. I'm cutting out the excuses and going, let's come to decision then.
Right.
So is this abusive? So we call it for what it is, not to condemn, but to bring an awareness of what God can bring about. So then there's, this is my desires into like every sign of toxic marriages. There's control, there's manipulation, there is a lack of order in the home. There are all kinds of things that, can add to the toxicity. So when people come in and they'll say, with a casual conversation or maybe marital work, they say, what do I do? Well, there's two things that I'm going to tell you not to do. Because I'm not going to tell you to do anything, but I'm going to tell you what not to do and what I'm not going to encourage. I'm not going to encourage you to do nothing. And I'm not going to patty cake it and call the Bible. When I say call evil good, God made this warning in Isaiah: woe to those who call evil good.
Right.
What does that mean? It means there's sin going on. It's wrong. But we just dilute it and hope it goes away. And eventually it creates a confusion over what's even right and wrong. And then it will pull you into codependency. You will have to be codependent. You will have to respond to the narcissism and fall under it and work in its ways. You will have to, with the addict, go up with the ups, go down with the downs, and you'll find yourself on this roller coaster ride. With the prideful person, you'll find yourself in don't go there situations that you have to dodge around. There will not be interdependency, which is healthy. There will be codependency. Your identity will get lost in their bondage. Mm-hmm. Not saying you don't have bondage, but in their bondage. And then you eventually, to have peace, you've got to overlook it completely.
I was just about to say that.
So what I'm telling you is not to do that.
Okay. So most people have already gone to that place. So let's start there.
Yeah. So when it comes to
most people are already at that point.
Yeah. So there's a couple scenarios that go on. I think you first, in order to address a toxic marriage, the goal is, so if you and I are toxic, we have a toxic marriage, the goal is you and I getting to a place where we soberly, with humility, see the issues at hand.
Right.
We almost need to like if you're watching the video, I'm holding my hands out. It's like out here versus you or me. It's like these are issues we have that we need to address,
we
right?
need technology that you can,
right?
Like in the movies, you put a ball right here or do something.
Right. And so that then the communication moves towards what are we going to work on? What's the accountability we're going to hold ourselves to?
Okay, so wait a second. We have to like divvy these out because that's the best scenario out of you're already in codependency, you're already in roommate, you're already toxic, okay? The fact that two people, we're bringing that percentage low, and I'm not doing it to be a want. It's just the truth. So please don't write me a comment about my negativity. It is the truth, okay? So stop.
Well, it's true.
Okay.
The Bible talks about in the end of the scriptures, the language changes from believers to overcomers.
Right.
So
there's a remnant.
Yes.
A remnant is not a lot of people.
It's the times are squeezing out who the remnant is going to be. So that's important.
Right.
Sorry.
No. So I lost my train of thought. Wait a second. Oh, okay. So we're already going to come from the place of let's put these two scenarios on the table. If there's just two, you're already in roommate. You're already like toxic, and there's a lot of stuff in your. The best scenario in this case is the two people can come together and put the issues in the crystal ball right here to go, this is what we got to deal with.
Right.
So take it from there with that first, and then we'll go to the other one.
Right. I was trying to think, what's the hologram? That's what I was trying to think of.
Yes.
Put it in the
We'll probably have that soon with the way.
The hologram.
Right.
You said crystal ball.
I don't know. That's the first thing I thought of. I know. We don't know. No crystal balls. We don't need that. Okay.
So, this is so most people don't know how to communicate. So you often need coaching to work on that. And you need the ability to go, all right, I repent of that. I'm wrong. Can I try again? So that's where the communication of heart is. We both have shared our heart. We want a great marriage. What does that look like? What does a great marriage look like? Not somebody else's or looking good, because then you have a value for it.
Which a lot of the times is a lot for people. You can go 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. We've even seen they've never had the discussion of what do we want our marriage to look like?
Right.
It's what the other person's needs were being told to the other person, never fulfilled.
So,
So the higher level of conversation is what do we want in our marriage?
Yes.
Go ahead.
And okay, so then there's a block that's realized. Here's a common one. Work is getting in the way. The business, it's not always him. It can be her, but a lot of times it's him. The work is interfering with our marriage. So you talk through it and you realize, oh, he ain't willing to budge. Mm-hmm. His job's everything. So would you give up your job if you had to for the sake of your marriage? It's just a test question. I'm not saying quit your job today.
We're not saying that. We're not advocating that.
So then it's like, oh no, it's just a simple yes or no. Simple yes or no.
Even the words would just suffice. I don't know.
And then a lot of stuff comes out which basically says no. So I say, okay, so let's just get this straight. In your house, your priorities are work, money, church, marriage. So I just want to put these down on paper, right? Because let's stop doing the talk. Why are we here to talk about this if there's no value for it? If I'm not willing, God's not telling me to quit the work that we do. But if I saw, and we have at times, it's one of the reasons why we ended that pastoring time, was because I put my family, my marriage first. And I saw where it was like, it wasn't flowing and where you and I and us individually were going.
Right. Well,
in our
because
life.
isn't that the deeper part of the question that you're asking someone? So if you're not willing to give up to your job, which we're not telling you to, and that's the order. The problem is that the spouse doesn't feel first, doesn't feel validated, doesn't feel important. Right. The goal we want to get to is the deeper meaning and deeper heart understanding of what's going on in the marriage. It's not about the job. It's about the deeper heart connection of really moving towards what covenant means.
Yeah. Yeah. And
the best thing you could give your spouse is honesty. Stop just be honest and face it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And many times, honest, hungry people are in these toxic situations. And what happens is they talk it out and they want advice on what they're supposed to do. And I understand. I hear your heart. Sometimes they want to know they've done all they can do. What happens is that mindset keeps you spinning. And we're not going to tell people what to do. It's your marriage. Some couples have gone into a separation. Some do it inside the house. It's kind of awkward, but they're like, some physically do a season of separation. And I get a lot of calls in that stage where it's like, okay, I've pretty much lost my marriage. The last hope I have is in this season we really work on things and try to build back together. Some people advise against that kind of separation because then it just further hardens. I think at times it could bring the last chance awakening. Sometimes we don't change unless we come soberly face to face with what could be losing. And then those steps, I've seen times where people have had to officially leave a marriage, and it's sad. We gloss over it. We don't take it lightly. I just go, just get a divorce. It's hard decisions. It's tough stuff.
Right. But we also take the stance, it's not an unpardonable sin.
Right.
It's not.
Right.
I'm sorry, but
Yeah. And
we hate it. We hate it like God hates divorce.
Right.
It's awful because there is a domino effect. There is a ripple that will always be with you.
I think the verse "God hates divorce" became translated into "God hates divorce people."
Right.
That's
oh my gosh. Right.
That's how it started to have its deeper effect.
Wow.
Because then it became
the guilt people carry.
Like the mark on your back that you're wearing everywhere you go. You got the label on you.
Yeah.
And we dealt with a lot of people who carried that. And then when you dig into behind the scenes what's going on, you're like, wow. And I think we have to approach this subject with compassion. When I grew up, there was a lot of judgment on people who got divorced. Judgment. And there was a lot of self-righteous judgment on others. Now that I'm doing the work that I've done over these decades, you really realize divorce is a symptom. It's actually a symptom of the deeper brokenness within our lives. It's bringing out the fatherlessness. It's bringing out what we were raised in. It's bringing out what our spirituality was indoctrinated in. It's bringing out all that. And what we need is compassion over these issues and battles, because we're never going to change the divorce statistics by just yelling at people, God hates divorce. Right. What we need is sobriety of our hearts. We need healing, church. We need healing, because a vast percentage of our marriages are not doing well. That we're not fulfilled. That wives and husbands are not finding great fulfillment in sharing with each other. They've fallen into maybe the first example of roommate I gave at the beginning of this, or they're in a toxic situation. It takes work. It takes forgiveness. It takes deep want to, and all those kinds of things. And so, whatever steps you take, you're going to have to work hard on your journey. And one thing that we have observed when many times talking to like a female that's like really wanting a better marriage, and her husband's toxic, and we often say, don't make your decision on leaving or staying unless you work on yourself.
Right.
Because you're going to need to connect. Those who have been willing to make the next decision have often said to me, I had to get to that place of realizing I was worth
being
standing for what was right.
Right.
And again, these subjects are not black and white. They're messy. We deal with messiness. And we're trying to bring clarity to it.
It's a subject that has a lot of nuance. Most of our topics do, and we can't cover all of those nuances.
Yep.
We would be here for hours.
And if you have differing viewpoints, then go out and help people.
Right.
That's what I say. Because a lot of
Don't
times,
condemn us. Do your own thing.
Because a lot of times people will come and have these amazing, well, this is what I think, and it's like they haven't worked with anyone.
Right.
Like, go work with scores and scores of marriages. Go work and see the dark things that are going on. And it'll sober you to being so less quick to, and like we said, we're not quick to have the answers, but we do want to raise the standard.
Absolutely.
Raise the standard for what's possible. And this whole series, Healing from Toxic Relationships, I feel like even for me, it brings up a lot of, it brings up stuff in my own heart that I've experienced and seen, disappointments, things I've watched. But I do believe in what God's word says about what's possible. And in our opinion, marriage is the biggest place where God sanctifies us the most. It's where he's wanting to do. So you could step away from a marriage for various reasons. I'm not here to argue that. I know people have had to make those decisions. But that doesn't fix it. That doesn't fix it. There's a lot of work, and there's a lot of allowing God to do some healing that's going to be necessary in that journey.
Right.
One resource I would encourage is the book, God Loves Me and I Love Myself. We found that people who've read that are like, okay, it helped me to see myself through a worth and value that's important before God versus getting stuck in victim, self-pity, or being the abused one and staying in those patterns. We'd highly recommend that. And if what we're saying and sharing is a benefit, it's a blessing to your life, it's helping you in your journey, go to markdejesus.com, click on the donate button. You can consider a one-time donation or become a regular partner, either a donation of any amount, or there's also a transformational tribe partnership where you can get access to some resources, either in audio or in video. I've got a number of teachings in video format. In fact, all the teachings I'm doing now have video format to them. I also have some great resources I've put out over the years that are on audio that you can get access to as well too. And currently, one of the books we're talking about a lot too is the Heart Healing Journey. I'm putting a lot of materials on this. And this is a great, like, if you look in your marriage and go, where can we begin to read something together? This would be a great start. This would be a great start on, okay, the two of us, two broken people, need some work. Where can we go with this? I would recommend starting there. And we pray that this episode has brought some edification, building up. That God is at work. I'm praying that his fire and his passion, and as well as his love, comes through. Because
amen to those that went through the whole thing. Sorry, I cut you off. I didn't mean to.
No, it's all right. If you've made it this far.
If you made it this far, you are an overcomer.
It's like a video game. Now go to level 2.
Right.
We'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
God bless you.